Good afternoon, my fellow students again. It's me, Isaac Tamuku, with English as a school subject, ACSE and DSE. As you can see on our screen, it's for the recording for November 2019, content-based contact session. Okay, now let's quickly go through the content of this presentation. As I said earlier on, this recording combines two papers, paper 1 and 2, for English, ASC, ENG 11. Now, the content of this presentation, we are going to talk about the aims of this recording, this module. And then we are going to define the concepts, morphology, syntax, semantics, and phonics. And then parts of speech, word classes, communication, and then text. And then we'll also talk about academic writing, summary writing, report writing, poetry. And then, of course, we'll talk about the novel titled All Quiet on the Western Front. And then we'll end up with reading. Okay, now let's talk about the aims quickly. You will see in your guidelines, in your syllabus, the aims of this course. It aims on building on the English and academic communication skills, which you already have. And this course will enable you to develop the theoretical understanding, values, and the competencies of the English language. And then the last two, to explain and apply the structural features of English, and to enable you as students to demonstrate reading, writing, to be able to analyze novels, dramas, and poetry. Okay, now as you see on our content, number 1, I talked about the aims. Now let's talk about the concepts. We have morphology, syntax, semantics, and phonics. Let's start with morphology. As you know, my students, you already have your guidelines, so I am not going to talk about everything you see here, everything you read in your guidelines. You also have your prescribed books to go through, so I'm going to summarize a few notes for you here. Okay. Now, morphology basically means word formation, the study of how words are formed, their relationship to other words in the same language. That is morphology. The form and structure of words in a language is called morphology, simple as such. And then we go to syntax. Now, when you form words, it's morphology. Now, the way the words are laid out to form sentences, that is what we call syntax now. By definition, it says the sequence in which words are put together to form sentences. Now you remember in the English language, the usual sequence is you have to have a subject, a verb, and then the object. Okay. Now we are done with morphology and syntax, and now we come to semantics. Semantics is the study of the meaning of words in a language. The meaning is what we call semantics. And then number 4, phonetics. Phonetics, you see in your dictionaries, in simple terms, it is called phonology. Phonology, especially in the English language, it is called the sound, how the sounds are formed in a language. That is the study of speech sounds, their production, transmission, perception, the analysis, classification, and then transcription. You will see in any given dictionary, you will find a word Just before the definition, you'll find the transcription of that word, how you must produce, how you must pronounce the word, pronunciation. Okay, so one more time, we talked about the concepts, that is morphology, word formation, syntax, the sequence of words, how words are laid out in a language, and then semantics, the meaning now, and we ended up with phonetics, the sound. Now, the parts of speech. In the English language, there are only 8 parts of speech. As teachers, I cannot go through them. We know them. We have verbs, adverbs, nouns. Remember, when we talk about nouns, we have common nouns, collective nouns, proper nouns, abstract nouns, compound nouns, and a lot more. Then we have pronouns, adjectives, conjunctions, prepositions, and articles. So those are the 8 parts of speech. You will see in our presentation, I put up examples in each case. For example, adverbs, they modify verbs. Like, for example, where, when, how, often, and to what extent. The nouns, you can see names of people, places, or things, and so forth. So I put up all the examples in all the parts of speech. Verbs, adverbs, nouns, pronouns, adjectives, conjunctions, prepositions, and articles. So those are the 8 parts of speech. Now, basically, from the 4 parts of speech now, what I expect from you as students is how to apply them in writing, and then to identify them in sentences or in a text or in any given piece of writing. You have to identify pronouns, adjectives, conjunctions, and all the parts of speech as mentioned here, and to give examples where necessary. Okay. And then from parts of speech, we go to word classes. Word classes, they are open word classes and closed word classes. Open word classes are classes of words where you can add new words to. For example, nouns, the main verbs, adverbs, adjectives, and interjections. So one more time, open word classes are those words you can add new words to. And then closed word classes. It is self-explanatory. Closed word classes. They only contain relatively small number of items to which no new words can normally be added. So by definition, open word classes, you can add new words to it, and closed word classes, you cannot add new words to those words. Okay. Now, communication. By definition, you'll see in your guides, communication refers to the exchange of information between 2 or more people. It can either be verbal, written, or it can be with the use of electronics nowadays. You can use your cell phone, you can Skype, you can communicate on the internet, and so forth. So that is communication. Now, from the word communication, we add accurate communication. Accurate communication is a type of communication without words, possibly because your actions and reactions are better or more accurate to indicate your true feelings than words are. So when you decide to communicate without using words, that is accurate communication. So you must know the difference between communication and accurate communication. Communication on itself, when you exchange information between 2 or more people, as we said earlier on, it can be verbal or written, or with the use of electronics. And then accurate, remember, without words. That is accurate communication. Okay. Now we have forms of accurate communication. Most of these notes are in your guides. We have smile, touch, nod, the personal space, eye movements, eye contact, and openness. So those are the forms of accurate communication. You have gone through them at one point or another. Those are the forms of accurate communication. Remember, we defined accurate communication, communication without words. So you can see the forms: smile, a touch, a nod, personal space, eye movement, eye contact, without words. So those are the forms of accurate communication. The forms of accurate communication. Okay. Now let's talk about text from our content. The content list. A text refers to a book or any other piece of writing regarded in terms of its content rather than its physical form. Any book or any other piece of writing regarded in terms of its content rather than the physical form, it is called a text. In the exam, you will be asked to analyze why a text would be analyzed. Say, for example, give reasons why a text would be analyzed. There are a number of them here. I'm going to go through all of them, just a few. The most important one, that is precise reading. Precise reading is to get the message from the text. If you do a precise or close reading, is to get the message, the theme of any given text. And then to find the meaning, which you can incorporate the background into the text. Those are the different reasons why a text would be analyzed. Just to repeat myself, you would analyze a text to give a close or precise reading, like a summary. And then to find the meaning beyond the obvious, to include and incorporate background into the text. Okay, and then you can also compare the text with other similar texts, and there are a number of them in your guides. And then you will see somewhere it's mentioned the thesis. To use the text to prove a wider thesis, a theme that was interesting to different writers at the same time. Okay, now you will see that word text, thesis. It will appear in our next presentation. It talks about the message. Why do you read a particular newspaper text? It's for you to get the message in that text. And then, as said earlier on, what is the thesis of a text now? As I said earlier on, the thesis refers to the central or main idea of the text, the main message in any given text. When you read a text in any newspaper, any book, any piece of writing, you will notice that sometimes a text can be about sport, can be about animals, environment, or anything. Then you know this text talks about degradation. This text talks about pollution. This text talks about football. This text talks about rugby, and so forth and so forth. So you know the main idea of a text is called the thesis of a text. Okay, now how do you find the main idea now, which we call the thesis in any given text? Now there are so many ways. You read the text a few times, and then you write down questions that you would want to ask about the text. And then if the text is a very interesting text to you, then you know. Is there anything that seems out of the ordinary or strange? Those are the questions you have to ask yourself if you want to find out what the thesis in a text is. And then the last important thing is you consider your questions and evaluate which ones are the most important. And now you eliminate the ones you think they are not important. And then you will find out which one is the thesis of any given thesis. And then there are other comments as well. To find the main idea, you can discuss by referring to other information. It's also one of them. one of the questions is, do they refer a lot or are they somehow the same? Do you ask the same questions over and over? Now, if your questions are answered, then you know you can easily find the thesis. Okay, let me just repeat myself once more for the sake of the exam. Now, if you are told to define the thesis, that is the main idea of any given text, and then the steps, we went through them. You also have them in your study guides. Okay, now academic writing. Now, as students studying through IOL, you will be required at one point or another to produce academic pieces of writing, not only at IOL but anywhere in your entire academic life. You will be required to produce academic pieces of writing. Now, what are the characters of academic writing? This is one of my favorite topics in the English language. Now, when you write an academic piece of writing, you must give your facts and figures correctly, as given precisely. You give your facts and figures precisely, meaning correctly as they appear. And then the style of writing is objective rather than subjective. I hope you know the difference. Now, when you are subjective, you must have a standpoint of view. You must pinpoint what you believe in. What is the side of your story? What is the argument in your argument? What are you trying to prove? What are you trying to make readers believe? That is your argument point of view. Okay. And then the main emphasis is on the information. You use more nouns and adjectives than verbs and adverbs. Meaning you mention places as they appear. You mention names as they appear. You mention all the verbs as they appear. You don't need to skip or maybe to minimize the number of verbs as used. And then, as I said, academic writing has to do with facts. You use accurate vocabulary as used. Words must appear the way they are. Academic writing, as I said earlier on, very important. When you write academically, you must take a specific standpoint in your writing. You must have a standpoint. The reader must know, as a writer, this is your standpoint. In language, we call it hedging, to know what you believe in. That is hedging. Okay. Then the language is complex, lexical dense, more varied vocabulary, and short and grammatically complex. There are a number of characters. You have them in your guides, or just highlighting a few points. And then one more important point here is that when you write academically, you must be able to justify your viewpoint, your standpoint, as said earlier on. You take responsibility of the claims you make. In other words, the facts you mention, the figures you mention, the names you mention, you must take responsibility. If anybody sues you, then you know you produce facts. Where your facts came from, you must tell us. Then you provide evidence for statements and be able to justify your viewpoints. This point is very, very, very important for academic writing. You please take note of this. Okay. And then, of course, it just ends with the viewpoint as said earlier on. Academic writing requires you to take a specific viewpoint. Okay, then summary writing. Before we come to summary writing, I want to show you something in academic writing. The bullet number 2, academic writing is explicit about the relations between different facts in a text. That means in one piece of writing, you can still argue about a specific point of view on your own. But even if you have two views, at the end of the day, you must give your own viewpoint, where you stand. Okay. Okay, now we go to summary writing. As you are doing English, you have been teachers of English for some time now. I know we have new students, but even if you are a new student, even at secondary school, you did summary writing. That is to shorten or condense a piece of writing without losing the character of the text. We have taken use of summary writing. You read the passage carefully in order to gain a general overview of the content. You read it again, and then it is usually, the first sentence of each paragraph is grouped together again. You see it says, when you read again, you read it again, the passage, and you underline the key sentence in each paragraph. Now, those key sentences are the first sentences of each paragraph. They are the topic sentences. Then you list the many points. You can use your own words. You write your first draft. You combine your ideas together in a logical sequence. You will read your draft. You count your number of words, and you are done. Basically, in brief, that is summary writing. And there are also a number of points in your guides to follow again. Okay. And then report writing. With this contact-based session, you will be required to write a report. It says here a report is an official piece of writing that carefully considers a particular subject. When you write about any given topic, you are writing a report. That is from the Concise Oxford Dictionary. Now we have a number of stages of report writing, but I want you to take note of the following. Of course, we know you clarify your terms of reference. Your terms of reference means the outline, the scope of your report. Why are you writing your report? The aim. It was just given a nice name, the terms of reference. Literally, it means the aims of your report. Okay, and then you plan your report. Planning allows you to write clearly and concisely what your report will focus on. And then you collect information, organize and structure the information, the title page, the content. And then let me start from the abstract and summary. Now this is where the real thing starts now. In the abstract, that's where you write a short paragraph summarizing the content of the whole report. It should include the statement of the many tasks, methods used, conclusions, and recommendations. Now the abstract or summary is it also includes the terms of reference, the aim of your report. And then you go to your introduction, where you also include your terms of reference again, that is your aims. And then on top of your reference, you give a brief background of the subject and indicate if there are some latest developments on the topic you are writing. Now, methodology, I like this one so much because so many students, they struggle to explain the methods or to obtain information. Methodology means the way you collect your information. It can either be through scheduled interviews, questionnaires, video recordings, audio recordings, or anything for that matter. Any methods you use to obtain your information, that is your methodology. And then results or findings, just a presentation of your information you obtained through your methodology. You can present your information in tables, graphs, pie charts, or charts, or diagrams, or in whatever form, or even tables to present your findings you collected using your methods. And then when you write your report, you consider all these questions mentioned here. They will appear on your screen, and then you also have them in your guides and in your prescribed textbooks. There's one thing I want you to talk about again here, the references now. Of course, the discussion is a large section where you analyze all results, and the conclusion, just to be clear and concise, and to do not include new information in your conclusion. Okay, now I want to talk about the references. Yeah, very important. Methodology and references are my favorite topics when it comes to report writing. This is where you acknowledge the work of other authors which you consulted or used as references in your report. Now, it means to avoid being sued, you must reference properly. Now, obviously, this is the right format to reference: your author's name and initials, date of publication, title of the book, the publisher, place of publication, number of pages, and the details of the journal volume and the number of the edition, if that is necessary. So, one more time, let me repeat myself again. Report writing, we have stages here. You clarify your terms of reference, you plan your report, you collect information. As we said, you use a number of ways, either questionnaires, interview schedules, or whatever you prefer. Then you organize your structured information, you put your title page, then you list your content, and then you write your small paragraph, that's the abstract, and then the introduction, methodology, you collect your material, and then your results or findings, you present them in different ways, either tables or graphs, and then you check if all the answers are correctly done, and then you discuss it, and then you conclude, and then you do your references. And then we have poetry. In this exam, you are only expected to know the technical features of drama, which are tragedy, comedy, symbolism, and tone, and which at this point you have already went through. We also have theme and characters. One more time: tragedy, comedy, symbolism, tone, theme, and characters. And now the most complicated part of this course is this novel called All Quiet on the Western Front. I have received a number of complaints about this novel. This novel was written by E.M. Ramakyu. Now, in brief, basically the novel talks about a few young men who were in school in Germany, and then their teacher encouraged them to go join the war. So after the sweet talk from their teacher, they now leave their school. Now they go to join the war. That is in Germany. Now the writer is Ramakyu. Now the person telling us a story is Paul Bama. That is the narrator. And then there are so many characters: Albert Kropp. You see the group leader, Stanislas Kazaski. That is the group leader, and a few other minor characters. Now, basically in the exam, I know it's a very thick book, that I know, but there are only a few questions from the novel. You will be asked about the significance of the title, All Quiet on the Western Front. If you go to war and you are on the front line of the war, do you think it's going to be very quiet? So literally the topic of the novel does not mean that it is very quiet on the Western Front. It says that the title is ironic. Nothing is quiet on the Western Front except that the narrator, Paul, is dead. Now, war still goes on. The title suggests that there is no more action on the Western Front, which is not true. So the death of the main character does not mean the end of the war. So the title is just ironically, it's not true that it is quiet on the Western Front. Literally, it only means the narrator, the one telling us the story, is dead, but the war still goes on and on. Now, you will be asked about the significance of the title. Those are the few notes there. And then the horror of war, you'll find them in the book. The terrible brutality of the soldiers is the overriding. When you talk about war, we all know about the First and Second World War. Anybody will tell you the problems the First and the Second World War brought on this planet. Now, in the book, war is portrayed as a very romantic picture of glory and heroism, with meaningless and butchery, the killings, the death, and so many bad things happened during the war. Now, the same book here tells us that millions of people died, and there were catastrophic levels of carnage, violence, and the battles which lasted for months, and the gruesome new technological advancements, for example, machine guns, the poison gas, and the trenches. So all those problems are the horror of war mentioned in the book. And then they also continue from there, you can see them. And then the effects of war on a soldier. As a soldier, what are the effects the war have on you as a soldier? There are a number of them here. As a soldier, you see, the soldiers are subjected to constant physical danger, and they are literally blown away to pieces at any moment. And the physical threat they also encounter from time to time. So those are all the effects of war on a soldier. There are a number of them there. You also have them in your study guide, but only to highlight a few. Obviously, we know they frequently go without food, sleep, or adequate clothing, or sufficient medical care. They are forced to deal with frequent sudden death of their close friends, and a number of terrible problems as well. And their emotions and accepting the conditions of their lives. Okay. There are also, the effects also still continue. You'll see them, they are all there in your study guides. Now, there's one thing I want to mention here as well about the emotional. In the author's view, this emotional disconnection has hugely destructive impact on a soldier's humanity. E.g., the writer becomes unable to imagine a future without the war. So, one of the effects of the war on a soldier is that you become so into your war, you cannot now imagine a world without war. So it's also one of the effects. It's like your brain is, you are turned into believing that war is the only solution. Without war, there's nothing good. Okay. Now, reading. Now, reading appears in your guide so many times. I think in paper 1 and paper 2 it appears as well. Now, what a teacher can do to cultivate a culture of reading in class. There are a number of points there. You go through them. There are a number of points. And then that is the end of presentation. We end here.